this one. This one is for you too. That one's better. Thank you.
I'm Command Master Chief Quentin Newsom for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. Thank you for joining us in this afternoon as we honor the crew of the USS Utah and lay to rest Chief Gil Meyer, USS Utah crew member of Pearl Harbor survivor and member of the greatest generation. We're especially honored to have with us today several guests who served our nation during the World War II on the front lines, on the front home front. We have us today, Jeanne Gibson and Erlinda Avila. Please recognize them. Please join me in a warm aloha for our special guests, for our general seating guests. Thank you for attending. The, the chairs are available for you to use, but please feel free to stand in the parking lot or off in the grass if it provides you a better view of this ceremony. As we begin our proceedings this afternoon, I would like to draw your attention to the proud ship that you see behind me, the USS Utah Memorial. The U.S. Utah and her crew served with distinction for over 30 years from her commissioning in 1911. Through her service in World War I, providing cover for Allied convoys in the Atlantic, to her final duty, her in Hawaii with the United States Pacific Fleet. On the morning of December 7, 1941, during the fateful attack on Pearl Harbor, she took multiple torpedoes, hits that caused her to capsize in much the same position that every see her today. For years in keeping with the wishings of the USS Utah survivors, this very simple, very elegant ceremony conducted at sunset on the eve of December 7th has exemplified the Navy's bedrock principles of honor, courage, and commitment. Those principles were exemplified by the sailors of the USS Utah, who with the ceremony and often without recognition did their duty under severities conditions, and today, the 83rd anniversary of the attack, we gathered together again to remember. I would like to invite Lieutenant Commander Elif with the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam chaplain to open our ceremony with a prayer. Chaplain Elif.
Let's pray. Lord, bless love. Lord, give them your great favor this day and every day. Thank you that in our nation today we are free to worship, we are free to pray, we are free to read your word, we are free to speak, we are free to share. And today we recognize that we are free because so many, including those 58 who are among those aboard the Utah on that infamous day 83 years ago, made the ultimate sacrifice. For them, for their families and loved ones, may we be forever grateful. Thank you that as believers we can be assured that you never leave us and you are always with us in this life and in the next. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Elif. At this time, I would like to introduce Tom Leatherman, the superintendent of the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Mr. Leatherman has been working for the Department of the Interior for over 35 years, starting as the interim in college in 1989. Before moving to Hawaii, Mr. Leatherman served as the superintendent at the National Park Service historic sites in San Francisco Bay Area, including the Ports Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial and Rosie the Reverator and WW2 Home Front National Historic Port. In October of 2021, he arrived on Oahu as the permanent superintendent for Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Please welcome Tom Leatherman.
Good afternoon, everyone. And another warm welcome for the Rosies. Great to see them again. I spent a lot of time in San Francisco Bay Area, so let's recognize the Rosies again. Well, on behalf of the National Park Service, welcome everybody. In 2008, the National Park Service took over responsibility of managing visitation to the USS Utah Memorial. And since that time, we've been working with the Navy closely to try to find a better way to get people out here. I know many of you probably struggled to find the shuttle that gets you over here. It's not as easy to access as the USS Arizona Memorial is. And so we've done a fair amount of work 3 times a week. You can now take a shuttle out here and visit the memorial. But we just today launched a brand new virtual Utah experience, and there's these cards that you'll be able to scan if you want to go, and you can see this memorial and you can experience some of the history from our Navy historian Jim Newman, as well as one of our Rangers, David Kelton. And you can also hear first-person accounts from Pearl Harbor survivors who were interviewed with their oral histories. So we're trying to do a little bit better job at sharing the information about the Utah. I think many have called this the Forgotten Memorial, and I think we're doing our best to never forget. And I'm proud to be here partnering with the Navy to make it possible for you all to come out and experience this. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Leatherman. For over 100 years, Pearl Harbor has served as the United States Navy hub for naval activities in the Pacific, and the Navy remains steadfast in our commitment to emulate the legacy of service represented by the USS Utah and her crew, and all of those who served here in December of 1941. Here to represent the United States Navy is Captain Samuel White, the commander of Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam. Captain White, a graduate of University of Missouri with a degree in chemistry, received his commission from Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida, following completion of Service Officer School in Newport, Rhode Island. He reported to USS Tortuga, LSD 46, where he served his Service Warfare Officer designation. In 1999, he returned to Pensacola, Florida for flight training in the P-30 Orion. Captain White commanded the United States Navy Naval Station Guantanamo Bay from June 2021 from June 2024, where he assumed and commanded Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in July of 2024, this year. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Captain White, Commander of Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam.
Thank you, CMC. Well, thanks so very much. I won't take too much of your time. I just want to take a few minutes and talk about some things that have to do with this memorial and then with Mr. Gil Meyer. So where can I start? First of all, you're probably looking around, you see that I'm not wearing a lei. Somebody did give me a lei, but then the grandson, Cade, stole that lei. Cade, stand up and show everybody the lei. I should be wearing this right now, but I didn't have the heart to actually take it back. Thought about this, but Cade wins, mostly because he has hair and I don't. And look, as I got here earlier today, I was looking at the crowd sitting in the front seat and saw the Rosies, as already mentioned, Jean and Orlinda. And very special thing about Jean, you talk to her, if she likes you, she hands you a photo. It's already produced, ready to go. Look at this. It's like a trading card for Jean. Jean, I see you laughing over there. You know what you did. All right. If you know anything about me, you know that I don't write speeches because I get my inspiration from the crowd. Oftentimes, I go flat because the crowd isn't into it. So if you want a good speech, you got to be a part of this. You sense that I'm not being somber, I'm not being sad. It's because of that young man sitting over there, Gil Meyer. He's the nephew of the chief that will be interned today. I was talking to him, trying to get some information about Chief. It's unknown whether he was an electrician or not. You were telling me a whole story about what he was. Let's just call him Chief. Chief Meyer, what he did and how he joined the Navy and what he did. So I'm going to give you some of the things that he told me. But as I was talking to you, and hearing that you traveled with your family all the way from Texas, including Cade, coming down, it was inspiring to me to see that we are here to really celebrate the life, a life that lasted for over 100 years, 100 years and 3 months. Gil was taking a risk when he was talking to me because he would say, I'm going to tell you a lot of things, you won't remember any of it. I said, I'm a chemist. I don't forget anything for about 30 minutes, but then I'll forget everything. I won't remember anybody or anything I ever saw or did. So let me tell you about Gil a bit. He joined the Navy when he was 17 years old. He wasn't even 18 years old. And he retired after 22 years of service. He wasn't even 40 years old. He wasn't even my age now. No, I'm joking, I'm 50, don't worry about that. So he did his 22 years in the service. Served, as you know, on the USS Utah. On the USS Utah, after the ship was hit, he transferred to the USS Detroit. It's all connected, all together. The Detroit was across the way, and when the Japanese surrendered September 2nd, 1945, he was in the bay next to the Missouri with the signing of the surrender. It all came back a full circle. And you know, as you get older and you start thinking about the service life that we've all committed to, one day that will be me. One day it's going to be Captain Ring. He doesn't believe that, or CMC Newsom. But that one day is coming, and somebody will be talking about us. And that day, I want it to feel just like this, looking out in the crowd, seeing a team that may or may not know the story of Gil here to mark the ceremony, the sunset ceremony of the USS Utah, but also observe the ceremony of interment of a sailor who was here up until 8 years ago. He made it a point to come down here and recognize this ceremony as often as he could until he could do it no more. I'm so proud to have met you. It was such an honor and privilege, and I look for a wonderful ceremony. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Captain Ring. Captain White. Now we pause to remember by the name the 58 crew members who perished on USS Utah on the morning of December 7. In the Navy Customs, the sounding of ship's bells marks the changing of a watch and the passing of time. The toll of the bell reminds us of naval service and the reverence that we owe to those whose legacy of sacrifice calls us to carry their memory with us as we take up the watch. Captain Andrew Ring, Chief Staff Officer of Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, will list the fallen crew member by name as Gigi Kastner. With the Pearl Harbor National Memorial rings the bell in honor of their lives and their service. Captain Ring.
Good afternoon. The crew members of the USS Utah. Seaman, Second Class, William D. Arbuckle. Fireman, Third Class, Joseph Beretta. Lieutenant Commander, Rudolph P. Pielka. Seaman, First Class, Virgil C. Bingham. Lieutenant Junior Grade, John E. Black. Fireman, First Class, John D. Blackburn. Seaman, Second Class, Palalis F. Brown. Fireman, Third Class, William F. Bruner. Officer's Cook, Second Class, Flasino T. Berogin. Seaman, Second Class, George V. Chestnut, Jr. Seaman, Second Class, Lloyd D. Clippard. Fireman, First Class, Joseph U. Connor. Fireman, First Class, John R. Crane. Seaman, First Class, David L. Crossett. Fireman, Second Class, Billy R. Davis. Seaman, Second Class, Leroy Dennis. Signalman, First Class, Douglas R. Rykoff. Seaman, Second Class, William H. Doser. Seaman, First Class, Vernon J. Eidzig. Quartermaster, First Class, Melvin A. Gandre. Bosun's Mate, Second Class, Kenneth M. Gift. Seaman, Second Class, Charles N. Gregor. Lieutenant, Junior Grade, Harold A. Havison. Seaman, Second Class, Clifford D. Hill. Baker, Second Class, Emery Howd. Ensign, David W. Jackson. Seaman, First Class, Leroy H. Jones. Ship's Cook, Second Class, William A. Judas. Yeoman, Third Class, John A. Kalin. Gunner's Mate, Third Class, Eric T. Kampmeyer. Fireman, First Class, Joseph A. Carabon. Seaman, First Class, William H. Kent. Gunner's Mate, Third Class, George W. LaRue. Lieutenant, Junior Grade, John G. Little III. Seaman, Second Class, Kenneth L. Lynch. Seaman, Second Class, William E. Marshall, Jr. Electrician's Mate, Third Class, Rudolph M. Martinez. Lieutenant Commander, Charles O. Michael. Seaman, Second Class, Marvin E. Miller. Seaman, Second Class, Donald C. Norman. Fireman, Second Class, Oris N. Norman. Electrician's mate, second class, Edwin N. Odegaard. Chief storekeeper, Elmer A. Parker. Ship's cook, third class, Forrest H. Perry. Seaman, first class, James W. Phillips. Machinist mate, first class, Walter H. Ponder. Shipfitter, third class, Frank E. Reed. Seaman, first class, Ralph E. Scott. Fireman, first class, Ensign T. Schaus. Machinist mate, George R. Smith. Seaman, first class, Robert D. Smith. Seaman, second class, Joseph B. Sousley. Fireman, third class, Gerald V. Strentz. Chief water tender, Peter Tomich. Fireman, third class, Elmer H. Ulrich. Fireman, third class, Michael W. Villa. Fire controlman, first class, Bernard O. Wettrich. Fireman, first class, Glenn A. White.
Thank you, Cameron. And the Rangers, Ranger Kashner. Perhaps no other gesture exemplifies the timeless bond of naval crews, devotion of service, and to one another than the committal of the remains of the surviving crew member to be laid to rest with the fallen shipmates. Chief Gil Meyer served as a crew member aboard the USS Utah until her loss of December 7, 1941. He later served aboard the U.S. Detroit throughout the remainder of the war and was present in the Tokyo Bay for the signing of the surrender on September 2nd, 1945. As a proud sailor, Chief Meyer understood the Navy core values of honor, courage, and commitment that embody the spirit of devotion to service and camaraderie with his shipmates. As a survivor of the dreadful attack, he embraced the role of keeping the memory of the crewmates alive by passing on his first-hand experience to USS Utah and her crew, and attended this annual ceremony as often as possible. He will surely be missed. In moment, it will be blowing taps. In memory of 58 Utah crew members who gave their lives in service to our nation. And also in honor of Chief Meyer and those who like him survived, but never forgot their debt of honor to their fallen shipmates. The Chief Myers has passed from this life, his memory will carry on through his family and others who knew him and loved him. We are honored to have with us today Gil Meyer's nephew to share his memories of a life well lived. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gilbert Benton.
What a crowd. I told him, I said, I wish you wouldn't have done that because I'm a crybaby too. I want to say, kind of combining Hawaii and Texas, aloha, y'all. I'm Gilbert Benton. Gil Meyer was my uncle. Gilbert Meyer Sr. was my grandpa. And it's funny because the first time he realized that I was named after him, we came up here and we were getting our rent car, and we both gave our license, and the guy says, two Gilberts. And he says, he was named after my father. And I said, no, I was named after you too. And he said, oh, I think that was the first time he ever understood that. Anyway, we are so honored, my family, to be here today to honor my uncle and all of the others. And all of you folks out there, thank you so much for being here. I'm not going to read this. I'm going to try to do like you and just kind of skim. I grew up hearing stories about the Utah. Of course, my mom was Uncle Gilbert's older sister. She was 2 years older than him. And she told us stories of them as kids. And I grew up hearing that. And I grew up hearing the story of how he slid down the side and swam underwater when the Japanese were strafing. And the first time I got here, I looked and I said, why did he have to swim underwater? It's not that far. So the first time I came with him, I asked him that, and he says, you see that road back there? Everybody look at that road. See where that car's parked back there? That's where the shore was. Every time they dredge over here, they put the dirt up here, and that's filled it in. So I told him, okay, you're still my hero. He was lucky. He grew up in Baytown, Texas. Actually, it was called Goose Creek at the time. And he learned to swim, so he would swim underwater. He wrote his World War II memoirs, and I just gave a copy over to the library over at the tower. And he talks about some of his shipmates that day, how they didn't know how to swim, but all of a sudden they learned. He said they learned to swim. The one guy who couldn't swim beat him to, there was a ditch they were digging. They were putting in a sewer trench back there. And he said they got to the sewer trench, and there was a lot of dirt because they had just started digging. He said mostly coral. And it gave them rocks and things to throw at the Japanese planes as they went over. I'm going to read a little bit out of his memoir in a minute. But one of the things, I want to be happy today because this is in honor of him. And we've come back. I came back with him 8 years, and my grandsons have been, and my daughters. And, you know, it's always been so cool to come with him. And we were talking this morning, and Zach, my grandson, when he was about 7, when he came, he asked a really good question. We were out there, and he says, how cold was the water? And I said, what a great question, Zach. And Uncle Gilbert said, I don't remember. All I wanted to do was get over there. So he didn't remember how cold the water was. He was my mom's little brother. My mom was an Army nurse. She was in the Army Nurse Corps. And she told me when this happened, they didn't have news like we have today. And it was almost 2 months before they heard anything. And I want to show you this. I know you can't see it. It was a little postcard. This is the front, and this is the back. And on the front, it says, nothing is to be written on this side except fill in the date specified. Sentences are not required. If anything else is added, this postcard will be destroyed. And he said, I am well. And that's all he knew for all of that time. We came here with him often, and I'm probably not going to follow this. We came with him often, and every time he got us, it was like being with a rock star. All of you Rosies, y'all are rock stars. And we would come with him, and Caleb and I said, he said, I'm tired. You sit there. We're going to go take pictures. We'd come back, and he would be surrounded by people. All of those survivors were like that. And we were standing there, and the lady said, do you know that gentleman? I said, yeah, that's my uncle. She says, would you think he would mind if I took a picture? And I said, give me your camera. Go stand by him. I'll take it. And Caleb had a good idea. He said, Grandpa, we should charge $5 a picture, and we could pay for our trip. That was pretty cool. everywhere we went, it was like being with a rock star. He got us into so many things. We met all of these admirals and officers and stuff. We got to ride on the admiral's barge all around Ford Island, got to see the ship from the other side. I'd never seen it from that side. And we got to go eat with the admiral and all of his VIP guests. It was really good, wasn't it, Caleb? We decided admirals eat pretty well. And he got us into, we were sitting over there in the NEX, and this young Air Force sergeant comes up and says, "Sir," because he wore one of these caps, he said, "Sir, are you a survivor?" And he said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, I do a tour. Would you like to go on the tour?" So there were several of us, and we went the next morning. We got on there, and he said, "Look at all these admirals and generals, and I'm just a chief. What am I doing here?" I said, "You're the one they want to see, man." You know. And so we got to do that. He took us places that I never knew. Way over there is where the mothball Navy is, and somewhere over there is where the degausser is that they used in World War II. And he showed us all of that stuff. It was really cool. And let me see. We got to do so many things, and this was the cool thing. Every single time he would say, "Oh, I know what I was going to tell you." We got to go on the 76th anniversary to the Arizona, and they had a memorial. They gave a Medal of Valor to the granddaughter, I think, of one of the sailors on the Vestal who had thrown a line over and saved 3 or 4 of the Arizona guys. And his officer said, "Don't worry about them, they're already dead." 3 of them were at that service that night. That was really cool. And every time he'd do that, he would look at me and he'd say, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Why do you think we bring you here every year, man? So you can get us into these things." It was amazing. Let me see. The first time I ever got over here, we had to stay over there. There was no bridge yet. The next time we came, there was a bridge, and my wife and I were driving across the bridge. I didn't know you needed a pass. And this young Marine stopped us, and he says, "You need a pass, sir." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'll turn around." And he says, "Where are you from, sir?" And I said, "Texas." And he says, "I'm from Texas. I lived in San Antonio." And I said, "We live close to Galveston." And we talked a while, and he says, "Sir, go ahead. Just don't blow anything up." So I got to come over. That was the first time I saw how far this thing is from the shore. And I thought, man, why do you have to swim underwater? Let's see. Oh, one time, Caleb, my grandson, and I came, and we got stopped on the bridge. I had a pass, and the young guy says, "Sir, would you pull over here?" And I said, "What do we do, Caleb?" And he goes back and he says, "Sir, who is Mary Meyer?" I said, "Well, she was my aunt, but she's deceased now." He said, "Sir, I think you need to trade cards. You have the pass of your own." I had the Gilbert A. Meyer pass. He had the Gilbert A. Benton pass. So we had to trade passes so we could get across. We always stayed over at the Navy Lodge the last 4 or 5 years that we came. And he would always come over here, and I'd say, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm just going to go over." And he would just come out here and just kind of hang around, you know. Let me see. Gosh. I already did this. I knew I was going to do this. The morning that this attack happened, he had just finished duty from nighttime, and he was in his rack below decks, and the first torpedo hit, and it woke him up, and he was so tired he went back to sleep. And then the next one hit, and he realized, "Oh, I better get up." He grabbed his brand new shoes that he had just bought, and as the ship was listing, he said, "I don't know if I dropped them or they just fell," because he was climbing up the walls, you know. And they got out, and he went down the side there, and he says, "All I had was my skivvies. The barnacles were really, really tough." And he landed, he came on one of these concrete mooring things out here, and he sat up on that and looked. And then all of a sudden the Japanese came by strafing. And he says, "I better get out of here." So that's when he started swimming underwater as far as he could back over there. I want to read you this. At this point, this is out of his memoir. At this point, the ship rolled so far to the port, the starboard side was now topside. With the roll of the ship and the danger from the topside timbers, the old Utah as you heard a while ago, was no longer being used as a battleship, but they had put all of the latest anti-aircraft guns on it, and they used they taught all of these sailors, and they put these 12 by 12 big pilings on top, and it was a radio control before they had radio control stuff, and they would go out into the ocean, and the bombers would come and practice dive bombing and bombing, doing water bombs and stuff. He said, I guess if you were on deck, it would have killed you because they were dropping them. Jim Taylor, who used to do this ceremony every year, he always said, the Utah did as much to win the war as every other ship, because all of those guys who were shooting down Japanese planes learned right here on this ship, and all of those guys who were bombing learned right here on this ship. I always thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, with the roll of the ship and the danger from the topside timbers, it was impossible to jump into the water. The one route left was to slide over the barnacles and the bilge keel to reach the water. With this degree of roll, men had to climb uphill to abandon the ship from the starboard side. It was no longer possible, or rather suicidal, to try to escape to the port. The falling protective 10 by 12 timbers used to absorb the impetus of the practice bombs could easily crush anyone who selected this route of escape. The starboard side was the only escape, the safest route left to abandon the ship. He didn't talk about it. I grew up knowing you don't talk about Pearl Harbor because Uncle Gilbert doesn't want to talk about it. And then one time in the 60s, we were all together at our house, and my dad, who was also a Navy man, had served on a naval hospital ship, and they turned out they were both in all of the same invasions during the war at the same time. And they started talking, and that's when I started asking Uncle Gilbert questions, and he started telling. And finally, he wrote this memoir, and it was like 130 pages. I was an English professor at a local college, so I said, would you like me to edit that for you? Oh, yeah. So I went line, 133 pages. I would mark out, this is really good. This you already said. You should put this up there. And I went through the whole thing, and I sent it back to him, and he says, good. About a month later, he sent me one. He says, this is my new first chapter. I said, no, do you not understand what final edit means? So he was always doing research. His memoir is so full of facts. He could tell you the name of the pilot who dropped one of the torpedoes that hit his ship. That's how much research he did. It was amazing. All right, let's see. The trench was very deep down to the solid clay. Dried heavy clods of clay remained from the recent trenching operation. These clods of clay, actually some form of coral, thrown at the Japanese aircraft by Utah's personnel in the trench, along with profanity, allowed all hands to an outlet to vent their anger and frustration. On this particular December 7, indeed, we were desperate, bewildered, and confused young men. He was 17, as you heard, when he joined. My grandpa had to sign for him to join. My grandma was very upset. She didn't like that at all. He turned 18 in July, and I could just see him as a 17 and 18-year-old sailor thinking, this is the greatest place to be stationed. A few months later, that changed. Okay, now when they got off of the ship, all they had was what they were wearing. Lee Susi, some of you may have known Lee or known about him. He was put back on the ship a few years ago. He was a corpsman, and he swam to shore with his little bag, and they ran out of medicine pretty quickly. So the Navy Lodge was officers' quarters. So they went over and broke into the officers' quarters and got all the alcohol they could find to work on the patients. And I'm sure that's all they used it for, just to work on the patients. But you can see over in the museum, I went today to look and make sure, there's the Red Cross badge from Lee Susi is over there in the museum. And I got to meet him and his wife and his daughter when they put him back on the ship too. Afterwards, they didn't have much clothes. I mean, all of their clothes went down with the ship. December 8, 1941, duty aboard the USS Argonne. On the afternoon or early evening of the attack, many Utah survivors boarded a 50-foot motor launch for transportation from Ford Island to the 1010 dock in the USS Argonne. This was our home for the next 2 days. After that, he went to the Detroit, and he spent the rest of the war on the Detroit. And as you heard a while ago, he said 1,000 feet off to the port of the Missouri. And he said, I was watching through a long glass. And he said, that was one of the best days of my life after they had gone through all of that. Anyway, he says here, the ship's engineering officer was also aboard the base force flagship Argonne. He recalled proctoring the fireman examination Friday before Utah was destroyed, and he always called it this, by the Imperial Japanese Navy's terrorist attack on Pearl Harbor. He said that until he died, 100 years old. He said to me, Meyer, do you know you're fireman second class? He went on to explain, because our records went down with the Utah, I remained second class. But not to worry, I would be fireman first class when I reached my next duty station. On 10 December, upon arrival at the Detroit, this new fireman first class was prepared for his new duty assignment. And he stayed there for the rest of the war. He used to tell me, we would talk about the kamikaze attacks. And he said, we were all so worried. And now I think about it, they weren't after us. We were an old ship. They wanted the big old ships over there. We were safe and didn't know it. I said, well, you were safe because you had somebody watching over you. There were not enough uniforms. All our clothing and personal belongings were left in our lockers. My attire was one pair of oily boxer shorts. I did grab my new black shoes when we were one deck below the air castle. Is that how you say that? Air castle? Air castle? Come on, all you sailors should help me on that. I said it right. Okay, thank you. We were one deck below that. The Utah was rolling fast. Both hands were needed to negotiate the starboard companionway. It is unclear whether the shoes were tossed aside or if they fell from my hands. Small stores on the Argonne and the Argonne sailors provided one old pair of dungarees, one large dirty hat. Only one pair of size 12 second-hand shoes were available. Imagine wearing size 12 if you're a size 9.5. When he got on the Detroit, and the first thing he did was sail back to California. And he wanted to go ashore and call my grandma and say, I'm okay. But the officer looked at him and said, you are not in the proper uniform. And he wouldn't let him go. So that's why this little postcard came to my grandma. Okay. He printed up hundreds of cards like this. One side, it says Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. It's got a picture of the Utah. On the other side, it's got a picture of the Detroit. And it says USS Detroit, Tokyo Bay, September 2, 1945. And he handed out hundreds of these cards. We handed out, my grandsons and I, and my daughters. And one day we were out here, and a guy came up and he said, I don't have a card. And Caleb, my grandson, said, I have one. He says, you tell him. And Caleb says, you see that? He was there. He skinned him down there. He got into the water and he swam over to here. Turn it over. You see that date? You know what that date is? And most people didn't know. He says, that was the day the war ended. He was on the Detroit and he was there in Tokyo Bay. I told him one time, we have handed out hundreds of your cards. Can you autograph a few for us? He stood there and watched Caleb tell him that story, and he was laughing. And the guy left, and he said, I guess you guys have heard that story a few times. And we all said, we have heard it, we have told it, we have handed out hundreds of your cards. He just loved that. And then again, we'd say, why do you think we bring you here, man? Because you get all this, you do all of that stuff for us. He loved to show us around. Once we were driving here on Ford Island, he showed us a building back over there that was used as the hospital after the attack. And he had a little bit of shrapnel in his finger. And he went over there and he said, I want to get a bandage. And this nurse said, get out of here. I have men that don't have arms and you want your hand bandaged. And he told me, he says, that old nurse. And then later on he says, she was probably 21 or 22, that old nurse, because he was 18. Years later, it was bothering him on his knuckle, so he went to the doctor and had it removed. And I said, did you keep it? Well, no, I've been carrying it around long enough. I said, well, did you tell the doctor what it was? And he says, yeah. I said, I bet he's got it in a little plexiglass box on his desk with a sign that says Original Pearl Harbor document or something, something like that. I said, I bet that doctor's using it. You should have kept it. I didn't want it. Let me see. Well, this is talking about all the cool things we did. I already told you that. Let's see. I told you about being in the NEX. The funniest thing is what I already told you. Every time he would get us into some of these cool things, and Caleb got so many challenge coins from officers, it was awesome. And one time he got one coin that was made out of the teak from the original deck of the Missouri, which was really cool. So that was neat. My uncle was very special. Like every one of the other survivors, they would never say hero. They were just guys who were doing their duty. I mean, he was a kid. He was 18 years old. And they would never, but that generation, the one we call the greatest generation, they went on to save the world for us. So, as we put him on the ship where he started the war, I thank you all for coming and helping us to honor him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. The theme of this year's 83rd anniversary Pearl Harbor Remembrance is forging ahead. As we look back and we remember our honored dead, we must also look forward and honor them with a renewed commitment to service from this generation. In 2025, the United States Navy will commission one of our newest Virginia-class submarines, the USS Utah. SSN 801 will carry on the profound tradition of courage, service as the namesake of the ship resting right here in Pearl Harbor. In keeping with the theme of forging ahead of we invite the commanding officer of USS Utah to speak on behalf of today's generation of sailors. Commander Christopher Hernog is a native of Happogue, New York. He received his commission in 2007 through the Seaman to Admiral program after graduating from the State University New York Maritime College with Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. He holds a Master's in Arts and Strategic Studies from Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. At sea, Hernog assignments included service aboard USS Memphis and USS Newport News, and as executive officer aboard USS Florida. He reported as an executive officer of Naval Submarine School in Groton, Connecticut in February of 2022 before taking command of Utah in August of this year. He lives in Ledyard, Connecticut with his wonderful wife, Jacqueline, and their two children, Alex and Amelia. Please welcome Commander Hernog.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, Gilbert. Myself and my crew are beyond honored and humbled to be here tonight at this ceremony. And like CMC was saying, we're here to pass on the reforging of the legacy that is this great ship behind me, the USS Utah. I want to briefly speak to something that Gilbert alluded to, the operational history of this ship here, which you might surmise ended on December 7th, but Gilbert, you hinted on it. And I've spent some time in a training command.
And it always stood out to me what she did the last few years in operations and what kind of force-wide impact her mission had in a role as a training command. She was outfitted with all of our nation's most advanced anti-aircraft weapons and systems at the time that would be distributed throughout the fleet. The crew and sailors of the battleships on Battleship Row would come here for temporary duty and learn on those systems, like the Chicago Piano, the 20mm Oerlikons, the 5-inch 38s. These are weapon systems that would rip to life in places like Guadalcanal, Leyte Gulf, turn around Cerritos Center Force on Taffy 3, those 5-inch guns on the Fletcher destroyers that just attacked the largest battleship the world had ever seen. Those men, those Marines, those sailors cut their teeth on those systems here. And they had to carry those lessons learned in that training forward. That is not a forgotten legacy. She's not a forgotten ship. That is a force-wide impact. And there's nothing more profound than realizing that the timbers on her deck were designed to protect the ship, because pilots from the Lexington, Saratoga, and Enterprise, the first time they pushed down on the yoke of a Dauntless dive bomber, what came into their sights was the silhouette of Utah, a ship underway and maneuvering, and they were practicing landing those bombs on her as a mobile target. The next time they would do that, little to their knowledge, was at places like Coral Sea or diving on Japanese flat tops at Midway, where we scratched 4 Japanese flat tops and changed the tide of the war in the Pacific. That is truly a force-wide impact. And that is the legacy of this incredible ship behind me, the sailors who are entombed there. And it is an honor for myself and my crew. And I'll ask them to stand up here briefly, gentlemen. I'm just humbled because I have this unique opportunity here to bring you up to speed on where we're at on her construction. As of December 4th, I got news from our colleagues at Electric Boat that the Utah is now pressure hull complete. So what does that mean? Well, modern submarines are built in modules in different places, states like Virginia, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Well, all those parts are now together, and she is a whole ship, and it is a sight to behold. The great folks at Electric Boat provided us with pictures of her in this current condition, and make sure you see one of my crew. And I promise you, if you don't get one tonight, let me know and I'll get it for you. On continued legacy and forging ahead, it's a profound experience to be building a culture, to be forming a crew. Right now we have 1/3 of our crew. Within about 4 months, we will be at a full complement. So right now, with each passing hour and second, there are new sailors arriving to Utah. There are new systems that are being constructed, lit off, and tested for the first time. There are new chiefs that are being made from the Utah, just like Chief Meyer. There are new submariners earning their fish, their dolphins on Utah. There are new sailors that are standing the watch, like your uncle did. And it's apparent to me that he never stopped standing the watch. Like any sailor worth his salt, you never truly do. But we have a saying in our line of work, and I'm honored here to be able to say to you, as families, relatives, that we now have that watch. But I want you to understand, you have a family, you have a crew, you have a ship. That legacy continues, and we will carry that torch from here forward. Thank you. It was an honor to be here today.
Thank you, Commander. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as able as we commit Chief Meyer to the USS Utah. Please feel free to sit at any time as needed. Also, Please remain at your seats throughout the committal ceremony so as we maintain dignity of the moment. Under guard. Post.
Mark time. March. Column turn. March. Detail. Halt. At a normal arm interval, dress right. Dress. Ready. Front. Order. Arms. Detail. Attention. Ceremonial at ease.
One pace forward. March.
Jump! Release. Stay. With blank ammunition, make ready. Jump! Aim. Fire. Ready. Jump! Aim. Fire. Ready. Jump! Aim. Fire. Present. Arm. Order. Arms. Detail. Attention. Ceremonial at ease.
Almighty God, we gather here today with heavy hearts to commit the body of our shipmate Gil Meyer to the sea, where he served with honor and devotion. Remember his honor, courage, and commitment to our nation and to the Navy. As we lay Chief Meyer to rest in the embrace of the ocean with his beloved ship, we pray that you will grant him eternal peace and rest in your loving presence. Comfort those who grieve, and may his service continue to inspire us all. Amen. You may be seated, and I would ask that Captain White, Mr. Benton, and Tom Leatherman join me in walking with Chief Meyer urn to the committal site.
Ham, salute. right. March time. March.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Thank you for attending. We have several baskets of flowers, petals on the memorial. We invite you to take this opportunity to lay them in the water and pay your respects to the crew of USS Utah and all of those who have gave their lives on December 7th. Enjoy the beautiful Hawaiian sunset and mahalo